Good morning, Broncos Country. The team's initial 53-man roster is set. It's expected to change quite a bit here today and in the coming week. We'll break down all the stuff on offense, defense. We'll talk about some trades that happened yesterday ahead of the NFL's deadline. You're going to get that and a cup of coffee on this morning's brand new edition of GMB. What's up, Broncos Country? Welcome into another episode of GMB here on Mile High Sports YouTube page. Every team, every day, Mile High Sports, you get Colorado Rockies, you get Denver Nuggets, Colorado Avalanche, and of course, Denver Broncos content here exclusively from everybody on the beat here for MHS. I want to give a special shout out to our friends over there, Superbook Sports. Thank you so much for sponsoring today's episode of the show. But let's get down into the meat and bones here on today's morning installment of GMB. The 53-man roster is initially set ahead of week one of the NFL regular season, with plenty of roster moves and fluctuations expected to happen over the course of the next week or so, and even some changes going in through maybe week 3 of the NFL season with Denver's roster, how it's already assembled. So let's go through and let's talk about the offensive side of the ball here first for the Broncos. Interesting enough, they're only carrying 23 total players on the offensive side of the ball. Now, no surprise, I think here at quarterback, you've got Russell Wilson. You've got Jarrett Stidham there manning the position. 2 quarterbacks on the roster. You got 3 tailbacks here, though. You've got Javonte Williams, Samaje Perine, and undrafted rookie free agent Jaleel McLaughlin, who has just been so consistent since he came in at OTA's rookie minicamp. And then you go through mandatory minicamp and OTAs before training camp had happened. You had the month off. You come through, and hey, once the pads came on, he impressed in every training camp practice. First preseason game came around, impressed then. Second preseason game came around, and that's when Broncos head coach Sean Payton knew specifically that he was more so in line to make the 53-man roster. Here's what Broncos head coach Sean Payton had to say.
In San Francisco, when the game ended, I knew he was on the track to be on our team or someone else's if we chose not to not to put him on our roster. So I think that was a big game for him. But look, I said this, and you guys have watched the practices. It wasn't anything that surprised us. We'd seen it. And to his credit, it was pretty consistent.
I think we would have all been surprised or shocked if Jaleel did not make the 53-man roster. If he were to have been released or waived, some other NFL team would have picked him up. And if you saw Brian Baldinger's breakdown over the weekend, he said the way that he runs and how he hits the hole is like smoke through a keyhole, which makes sense. I mean, this is a guy who has the ability to shift, change direction at any given moment. He can be a valuable weapon here, I think, in the offense for Sean Payton. I'm excited to see how he uses him this upcoming season. Can also provide some help in the return dynamic at kick return, specifically here for the Broncos. But let's take a look at fullback. There's obviously one fullback that we're going to talk about there, and that is Michael Burton. He obviously made the roster. Offensive tackle, 4 total players made the roster here. Garrett Bowles, Mike McGlinchey, Cam Fleming, and undrafted rookie free agent Alex Pelcheski made the active roster. So those are obviously 2 undrafted rookie free agents that we've talked about so far that are on the 53 for Denver here. It's a nice little hit marker there here for the Broncos. And then you look at center, Lloyd Cushenberry, Alex Forsythe, the 7th-round pick out of the University of Oregon, made the roster. Interior offensive lineman at the guard position, we look at Quinn Miners, Ben Powers, and we also have Luke Wattenberg, who made it. Now, to me, I think this was probably the most head-scratching move that the Broncos had on their 53-man roster, just because going back and watching the tape, I don't know what the coaches said, and look, I'm not going to dispute it. They obviously see something in Luke Wattenberg. They invested a 5th-round draft pick in him last year. I just felt like I watched too many instances of him getting beat on a play. Now, it goes back to that first game against the Arizona Cardinals. He's the one who allowed the Arizona Cardinals to block Brett Maher's kick, that he had a second kick attempt there from 52 yards. Can't have stuff like that happen. It's simply unacceptable there, so maybe he's learned from that. And then I've also seen instances in the offensive line where he's just gotten manhandled by a bigger, more powerful defensive lineman. That's simply not going to work. And look, he got thrown into the fire a little bit last year in the regular season, and unfortunately didn't answer the call there. And, even as Daniel Hackett said that they didn't do a good enough job as a coaching staff to put support behind Wattenberg in those situations. But you can't run into that issue here. You simply can't afford that, and you can't get manhandled. So I'm very curious to see what they decide to do there. really, I'd say the interesting ones that we're going to talk about here at wide receiver. Denver only has 4 guys at wide receiver. One of them is currently dealing with a hamstring injury and is questionable to play for week 1 here. So Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, rookie Marvin Mims, who was spectacular in the Broncos preseason finale against the Los Angeles Rams, and Brandon Johnson make up 4 total players at wide receiver here on the active roster, which imagine here today, Denver's going to practice once again. There'll be some procedural moves, some players going on short-term injured reserve that will impact how this all goes about. So maybe they will add maybe somebody back onto the practice squad. I know Lil Jordan Humphrey is expected to sign back onto the practice squad for Denver here this afternoon. We'll see if that formulates and goes through there. They could even add some other teams' players from the waiver. They picked 5th in the waiver wire order. So we're going to find out a little bit more here today. But 4 total wide receivers right now on the active roster is a little bit of an interesting thing here. But it also opens it up that I think we're going to see Denver offensively under Sean Payton. I think they're going to be invested in a lot of 12 and 13 personnel. What is 12 personnel, Cody? Well, that's where you have 1 running back, you have 2 tight ends. What is 13 personnel, Cody? It's where you have 1 running back and you have 3 tight ends. So you can supplement certain things, do some play action looks out of it. Denver's obviously been very creative with that, but I think the idea is to run the ball, to set up the pass. That's how I can read these personnel moves so far. Obviously, subject to change by the time week 1 rolls around. And then let's get to tight end and fullback. We already talked about Michael Burton as the fullback, but Denver keeping 4 tight ends, Greg Dulcich being one of them. You have Chris Manhertz and Adam Troutman being 2 others, and undrafted rookie free agent Nate Adkins, a hybrid fullback tight end type of option there. Sean Payton talked about how much he liked the versatility that he provides to the Broncos. Not only that, he's going to play an impact role on special teams for them. So Denver at this point in time, and we'll get to some of the other ones, they've got 4 total undrafted rookie free agents on their 53-man roster. They've got every single draft pick from 2023's NFL draft class on their 53-man roster. So some young guys and a lot of new faces here in this Broncos locker room that simply were not here last year, combined with all the veteran names that were here last year. Denver might have a very strong young nucleus here. We'll have to see how it formulates, and obviously you're going to have to go through, play some games, and maybe see where you're at. But initially, I like where Denver's at. But 23 total players on the offensive side of the ball here for the Broncos. And Broncos Country, as you're watching along here on YouTube, make sure you interact in the live chat. You interact in the comment section. Were there any surprises to you about the Broncos offense and maybe how it formulated here on the 53-man roster? We'll dive into the defense here on today's episode of GMB. Real quick, let me tell you about our friends over there at Superbook Sports. Why bet with the big boys this football season? Well, instead, try your hand with the local book, Superbook Sports. This fall, Superbook Sports is the book next door, just a dedicated team of the best odds makers in Las Vegas, making sure that you get the best prices and parlays anywhere. And now Superbook will give you a bonus of up to $250 when you sign up and wager on the same day and use the promo code MILEHIGH. So bet with the best and use promo code MILEHIGh this football season with Superbook Sports. Visit superbook.com for terms and conditions. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. What does the Denver Broncos 53-man roster look like on the defensive side of the ball here? A lot of surprises and a lot of depth overall. We talked about 23 players being on Denver's offensive side. Well, guess how many? 27 here for Denver's defense. So let's start off with some of the positions that have the most beef to them right now. And surprisingly, cornerback has 7 total players right now on the roster. You've got Patrick Surtain and Damari Mathis, 2 guys expected to be your week 1 starters. Asang Bassi expected to be the starter inside the nickel position. You've got Jaquan McMillan, who had a tremendous last regular season game last year. A great training camp, great preseason for him overall. K'Wan Williams, who is expected to be one of those players that goes on short-term injured reserve after undergoing ankle surgery on Monday in North Carolina. And then you have Riley Moss, who was your 3rd-round draft pick that you traded up for, who had core muscle surgery. He's still working his way back. He was on the side field during Tuesday's practice at the Centura Health Training Center. He's making good progress, but you're going to need some bodies. You're going to need some guys that can help bring things along, and that's why I think Denver in particular, they brought back Tremont Smith. Didn't necessarily have a great preseason at the cornerback position, but is viewed very highly as a core 4 special teams player and contributor. And you have to factor in, with K'Wan Williams going to short-term injured reserve more than likely, Asang Bassi expected to start in the nickel here. You can't expect him to start at the nickel and play all core 4 special teams, because if he gets hurt playing one of the special teams units, it takes you out from having yet another defender there inside the nickel. So you can expect maybe some of the workload that Bassi would normally have on special teams. He'll play some, but not every special teams unit. Now you can expect Tremont Smith to play a little bit of a role in that facet. Also expected maybe Fabian Moreau, veteran cornerback, could end up back on the practice squad here today, so something to monitor. But 7 total cornerbacks. I'm not opposed to that. You all know me. I'm a defensive back guy. I played cornerback for 12 years. I coached it. I love DB plays, so it just gives me a little bit more film to be able to watch all these guys and evaluate them. I'm excited about that. Definitely a little bit of surprise here as well at safety. There's 6 total players, so 13 total defensive backs here for the Broncos on the defensive side of the ball. Justin Simmons, Caden Stearns expected to be the 2 guys to start there. Kareem Jackson's on the 53-man roster. PJ Locke's working his way back from the ankle injury. And then you also have J.L. Skinner, who was drafted this year in the 6th round, and you have last year's draft pick, Delarian Turner-Yale. All of these guys are expected, when you talk about it, DTY, J.L. Skinner, they're going to play a role on special teams right away. They're going to have to play at that, make their hay a little bit. We'll see if Kareem plays on any of the special teams, especially as PJ Locke's working his way back from the injury that he dealt with a few weeks ago at training camp. Outside linebacker, Randy Gregory, Jonathan Cooper, Nick Bonito, Frank Clark, and Thomas Incoom, the 4th undrafted rookie free agent that has made the 53-man roster for Denver. They make this up right now. There are some other outside linebackers that are expected to come back to the practice squad. Aaron Patrick could be one of those players. Sean Payton and even George Payton met with us yesterday and said that, hey, they expect to have, 1 or 2 guys outside linebacker, that position specifically on the practice squad. Didn't say whether it was going to be those guys that I just mentioned, but obviously worth noting, I know some of you are wondering, hey, you didn't mention Baron Browning. Well, he is staying on the PUP list, of physically unable to perform list. He will miss the first 4 games of the regular season, but Broncos GM George Payton told us after practice that he's very pleased with where Barron is at in his recovery from that meniscus surgery. He believes that he's ahead of schedule and that they're going to see where he's at. He's going to miss the first 4 games, but they're going to see if he can come back after that 4th game against the Chicago Bears. Obviously a road game there, and maybe getting him back at a crucial stretch where you're going to be playing the Kansas City Chiefs, the Green Bay Packers. You're going to have a little stretch. You're going to be challenged there a little bit here at the start of the NFL season. Barron might be a good guy to get back at the right time here for the Broncos. Defensive line, they released Mike Purcell as a procedural move. He's expected to be brought back today once some of these other players go on that short-term injured reserve there. But you have DJ Jones, Zach Allen, Matt Henningsen, Elijah Garcia, and Jonathan Harris making up the Broncos defensive line group here from a depth standpoint. We talked about Purcell. There'll be some other guys that make it back onto the practice squad, or guys from other teams that make it onto the practice squad. So something to keep your eye on there. And then no surprise at inside linebacker, 4 guys: Alex Singleton, Josie Jewell, Drew Sanders, the impressive 3rd-round rookie out of Arkansas. And then you have Justin Sternad, who's going to play a very pivotal role on special teams here for the Broncos this upcoming season. And then you have 3 specialists: long snapper Mitchell Fraboni. You've got Riley Dixon at punter. You also have brand new kicker Will Lutz. The Denver Broncos sent a 7th-round pick to the New Orleans Saints in exchange for Lutz, and he will be kicking in Denver. Obviously, for him, coming off of an odd year last year, 74.2% field goal percentage. Had a little bit of an off year, made every single bit of his extra points, though, including making a 60-yard field goal in a clutch situation against the Jacksonville Jaguars last year. I asked Sean Payton after practice, his thoughts on maybe how Lutz will come in and fit in. Well, here's what Broncos head coach Sean Payton had to say.
I think he'll fit in fine. At the beginning of the whole process, he was a target for us. We knew they had 2 players. Meanwhile, our guy was doing well. I was there through the whole beginning with Will, and then, he went through a core muscle injury, much like Riley's going through right now. Obviously, his numbers dropped off a little bit. We had a really good training camp for them. We've seen all of his kicks. And got pretty good information on how his practices went. So a lot of it was, a young player who, we think is extremely talented. And look, this is a place kickers want to be with the altitude and the conditions. So, we're excited about that.
And we'll see how things maneuver here for Denver and for Will Lutz. And obviously maybe a change of scenery can be a good thing for him, something to monitor here as we go forward. But then there was also another trade that the Broncos were involved in, folks. And initially they had waived Albert Okwuegbunam. But what had happened, though, initially is because it was not yet officially 4 p.m. Eastern time when that move was happened, the Philadelphia Eagles, they swooped in, pun intended there, and they submitted a trade request there. And all Denver did is they swapped a 2025 6th-round pick and a 2025 7th-round pick. So Denver gets the 6th. I think Philadelphia gets the 7th. And now Alberto Cueburam is going to be the number 2 tight end behind Dallas Goedert in Philadelphia, which, hey, I'm excited for Alberto. I'm bummed he couldn't make it out here in Denver. I've had a chance to get to know Albert over the last year or so. We really kind of bonded because I talked to him about, ACL recovery because I tore my ACL. He's been through it, and he gave me some great tips. And so, for Albert, I saw him last year, and I was able to chat with him as he was going through that really dark time in the Nathaniel Hackett era. And it's just unfortunate that the Broncos and Hackett and that coaching staff, they wasted an entire year of Alberto's career. But an impressive preseason showing from him against the LA Rams. I'm rooting for him. I'm hoping he goes on to have a lot of success in Philadelphia and he contributes in a big-time way. But overall, Broncos country. That'll wrap up some of the roster moves that we're going to talk about here today. And obviously, on tomorrow's episode of Good Morning Broncos, make sure you pour yourself a cup of coffee and you join me as we talk about who's making up the Broncos practice squad, who are some of the other procedural moves that we saw happen. You'll get all that recap and much more on tomorrow's brand new episode, GMB. We'll see you then.